There and back again, a carver's tale. Here I was, one dark day in late December, heading uphill to the university woodshop with a heavy chunk of aspen wood in my backpack. Under my feet, the early thin sheet of snow cracked. The stars shone, uncertain in the crisp winter air. Entering the warmth inside, I secured the wood to the workbench. The logs bark cold and soft, colored splashes sprawling on the grey bark. For some 20 years I had researched other people's carving. Now, at last, it was time for me again to study my own making process. I wanted to make sculptural bowls inspired by neurons. I wanted to explore my limits in 3-dimensional ideation and carving. Therefore, I looked for as complex lines as possible to carve into my piece of wood. That was when I realized for the first time that something was very, very wrong. In the weeks leading up to this point, I had experienced some instances of vertigo and disequilibrium. The symptoms were vague in the beginning, gradually getting stronger. Once I was in my living room watering my plants, and suddenly I could not find the pot, watering the shelf and sofa instead. Bewildered, I sat down and found dark stripes rolling downwards across my right eye like an old television screen, reloading and reloading its image. I had not yet linked these incidents to anything of relevance for my wood carving, besides their making me unusually tired. Well, and the fact that I sometimes had one hand 15 centimeters misplaced, which could be somewhat dangerous when the perceived end of my hand ended in a sharp carving iron. The day I first called my doctor, I was in the exuberant first stages of wood carving, muscles shaking, sweat drops running under my sweater, finger-thick chips of sap-dripping aspen wood flowing through the air, the rhythm set by the loud cracks of the mallet. Beneath this insisting pounding, drowned to bare whispers, were soft taps of chips falling to the floor, cold, wet chips tickling my bare toes. As I dug into the wood of my first bowls, the symptoms snuck up to me as gently as a snowflake falls on my shoulder. My hands glided over the wood, easily making curves. Where do the ends go down to the table surface? Where will the negative space be? I marked out my grey and brown pencils, pushing hard, making bold strokes. This part should be cut away next. Lifting the piece up again to secure it on the bench, I stumbled. It is nothing. I'm just a bit unsure. Where should I cut again? I trusted in my brown marks, cut some more, turned. Where was I? I usually relish this next part of carving, when the detailed outline, until now seen only on the top of the piece, is extended to the sides and underneath. I used to let myself sink down, immerse in just the rich, succulent depth of the heart of carving, but now it simply fell apart. I turned and turned the wood, just making myself dizzy. I got lost at once. I pinned the forms down on mental crutches of paper, copying instead of ideating, cutting out the templates. This will be useful now. Oh, it is so difficult. Frustrated and slightly nauseated, I started carving out the other bowl instead. I made sure to make this one simpler, with a less complex shape, fewer lines, fewer overlaps and twists. I'm so tired. Why are my tongue and right cheek tingling? Looking back, the depth of my denial of the severity of my symptoms and how much they influenced my carving is uncanny. Only after 10 days of other tests was I sent for an MRI scan of my brain. After the images was taken, I sat in the waiting room looking outside as the short January day darkened. People came and went. Pools of dirty snow melted on the floor. They let me see the picture of my brain. A tumor the size of a golf ball clearly visible. Without a name for it or an explanation, they told me to get myself directly to the hospital for more tests. A 2-hour drive between snow-burdened trees, smothering in silence and darkness. I returned to my carving as soon as the hospital released me, 2 days later, like a heavy oil tanker running full steam ahead. I do not think stopping ever occurred to me. I had planned to do research now, so I just got on with it. It probably also functioned as a way of turning a blind eye, engaging in a familiar activity, a lifeboat to cling to. I guess we all do what we have to do to get by. Instead of returning to the woodshop, keeping the piece stuck on the workbench, standing upright and putting my entire body behind every cut, I sat down, holding my bowls gingerly in my hands, cutting away small black specks, not ideating new forms. When I ideate forms, I'm using my stored memories of previous three-dimensional situations to make virtual templates for how each of my actions will change the wood and to know where my next cut needs to be. It's an activity specifically drawing on a combined spatial understanding and mental rotation skills, requiring a part of my brain that now housed a tumor, offline, busy. No wonder, perhaps, that I had to turn paper templates as mental crutches to guide my carving. No wonder, perhaps, that I turned away from the more complicated bowl and worked on an easier one. I carved as I always had, yet I carved as I never had. I was present and I was not. I did not see, really, not with my eyes. I saw with the skin on my fingertips. I saw with the sharp end of the gouge, the grain, bumps, wood chips gently poking my skin. Fog clouded my awareness. Was I here carving, or were I somewhere else? Was it me carving, or was I watching someone else carve? I kept getting lost when I changed the position of the gouge's edge, my hand, the object, or my gaze. My world would suddenly turn, lurching to the side, in-head earthquakes, setting my vision spinning or twisting my thoughts and setting them running aimlessly round and around like scattered grouse in hunting season. In the last video recording before the surgery, towards the end, I talked slowly, cut slowly. I sometimes carved cross-grain without seeming to mean it, appearing confused and searching for places to carve. Sometimes my movements looked fretful, flimsy, searching. I could still carve, but barely. I would not say that I bounced back, but by the 11th day post-surgery I was feeling good enough to return to the woodshop at the university. I dove right into the thick of it, using a mallet to hammer my gouge deep into the wood. Oh, I've been longing to do this. I used the brown pencil to mark the main outlines and capture the big areas. Dry like last year's firewood, my bowl in progress resisted me. Hard splinters accused me of not working hard enough. The next weekend at home, during the 6 weeks of radiation and chemotherapy, I went back to the woodshop, upbeat and ready. I targeted a little canyon between 3 separate dendrites situated in a different depth and flowed over and under each other. The biggest canyon was positioned so that I needed to cut cross-grain downwards, leaving cut fragile cross-grain fibers on both sides of my cut. My sense of space now willingly permitted me to understand and visualize how this should be. Confidently, I reveled in the burgeoning feeling of expertise. This is what I do. This is how it should feel. As natural as spring follows winter. My sense of space had been gone, and now it had come back. Was I as confident as I thought I was, though? Although I was working on the hardest part of the hardest bowl, it was a limited area. There was no hesitation as I switched back or between sides of the little dendrite bordering the canyon. The video stills are only seconds apart. However, there was this lingering memory of problems, a slight echo of past misunderstandings, pulsing in sync with the dull cotton-muted throbbing in my head. In the article, which contained this autoethnographic narrative I read excerpts from here, I circled around the question, how do I, a woodcarver, experience losing my sense of space, in particular the ability to ideate three-dimensional forms and mentally rotate objects? Tangible to me only because of its previous absence, I could grasp my spatial skills only when they returned. My case exemplify how fragile and prone to bias our skill conceptions are, how they limit or facilitate our perspectives, our ideations, our imagination. In a future world of robotics and artificial intelligence, everything may seem possible to create an experience, but not everything is possible. We cannot envision something if we cannot conceive it. Here is where I continue my research, exploring spatial skills and how it interweaves with our daily life, and in wood carving. And you can read the full story, methodology, theoretical perspectives and findings in the article. It's published in the journal Craft Research on this link. Thank you for listening.